Welcome to Pacific Mammal Research's Marine Mammal Highlight Series. We are a 501c3 research and education nonprofit studying marine mammals in the Salish Sea off Washington State. In this series, you will learn about different marine mammals as we discuss interesting facts about each species. This is our way to geek out, share some information, and have some fun. We hope you enjoy the series, and be sure to follow us on Instagram to vote for which animal we talk about next. And without further ado, welcome to the PacMam podcast. I'm Cindy.
And I'm Kat.
And this week, we once again apologize for not being on top of it. We were going to send out the marine mammal poll for you guys to choose who's going to be on the episode. But we had so much going on with our 10th anniversary celebration, which was on Sunday, and it was amazing. And to everybody who showed up and donated and had fun that day, like, thank you so much, because it really was a wonderful event. We really felt loved and supported, and cannot thank the community enough for your support of us. But because of that, we kind of forgot to put the poll out. So
other things kind of took precedence, unfortunately, but we have a fun one. So don't hate us, because it's really, you'll like it.
Yeah. So I asked Kat, I was like, okay, we're just going to choose one. So which one? She's like, how about the Irrawaddy dolphin? Because that sounds fun. And I was like, yes, that sounds great. I mean, the name is just fun. Irrawaddy.
Yep. Super fun name. Mm-hmm.
There's some neat stuff with this little rivery type, dolphin-y type thing. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. And Kat, tell us about, oh, they're so cute. What they look like. And then kind of
they are so cute.
Distribution.
Yeah, my pleasure. So yeah, they are, if you're not watching this on YouTube, go look them up, because they are super cute. And it's funny, actually, when I was going through and researching this, a lot of the descriptions actually reference that they kind of look like beluga whales.
They do. They
look only with a dorsal fin, and we'll get to a couple similarities here in a moment. But not in terms of where they live. In terms of where they live, they're nothing like belugas. So these guys are found in the opposite. They are found in marine, brackish, and freshwater environments throughout tropical and subtropical Indo-Pacific regions. So this is kind of, you think about kind of like South and Southeast Asia area. So they are found in coastal areas there. They're also found in 3 rivers. I apologize in advance for trying to pronounce these names, but I'm going to try.
We're going to apologize for all of them, because I'm going to also have issues.
Yeah. So we have the Irrawaddy, or the Myanmar River, the Mahakam River, or the Indonesian Borneo, as it is also called, and then the Mekong. So those are the 3 different rivers that they inhabit. And then also a couple of lakes as well, the Songkhla and the Chilka lakes, which is really interesting.
Mm-hmm. I have one about the new research on for what.
Oh, cool. All right. Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to see what the new research is, actually. But as with a lot of the species that we've talked about recently, the range is fairly poorly documented. So while we know that they can occur in these areas, and there's reports of them up as far as like parts of Australia, or I guess south as far as northern Australia and things like that, we don't really know in a lot of these places like how abundant they are in some of these places. So where the habitat has been studied, they are often associated with deep pools or seasonal pools, confluences in rivers, and or above or below rapids. So kind of specific locations, particularly in those river environments that they seem to inhabit. But the distribution is interesting, because like I said, to me, that actually sounded like a pretty extensive description of where they actually can be found. But in terms of how frequently they're found in these places, if this is just a random couple animals, it seems like it is still fairly poorly documented.
A lot of a few of the new research that's mainly what the new research is about, is actually documenting where they're at, because they don't really know very well.
Yeah, and it makes sense. I mean, a lot of these places are not necessarily hospitable to scientific research in terms of just access, in terms of funding to be able to get research efforts out to some of these places. They're some of them are pretty far flung in terms of trying to actually access these locations unless you happen to live there. So it makes a lot of sense as to why this would be a little bit more of a challenge. But let's keep going and talk about what they look like now that we've teased you all and said how cute they are. So Overall, they kind of resemble the finless porpoise, except with a dorsal fin. Like I said, they also look like a gray version of a beluga in a little bit. They have a very
Just beluga.
rounded face.
Mhm.
Yeah, they have a very rounded head. They have a really no prominent beak at all. So it is much more like a beluga whale in that kind of just like curvature, very pronounced head and melon, that kind of curving over the lips. So it really visually, they do really resemble a beluga.
It's like bulbous versus being like
Yeah,
more of a slant. It's just like the bloop.
yeah. The other thing that resembles beluga whales is that they have flexible necks. So just like beluga whales, they can actually move their necks around in ways that other dolphins typically cannot. Um,
Except for the river dolphins. Other river dolphins have more flexible neck,
I
right?
was getting there because
Yeah.
these are effectively a river dolphin, right? These guys are found in rivers and freshwater areas, and so that is actually something that the other river dolphins have in common. And it's thought that a large part of that is because of the environment that they live in, and needing to be able to have more flexibility in the neck to navigate around obstacles in the river, to be able to see through potentially very muddy water, and just in general, just be able to have more movement flexibility in these very restricted areas that are often full of like a bunch of detritus and stuff too, like tree roots and leaves and things like that.
You see that in other animals too, even in ocean, like coastal versus offshore ecotype bottlenose dolphins. The ones that are coastal have features that are more for maneuverability, and the ones in the offshores are more for like speed and just being out in open ocean where you don't have to have that maneuverability availability. So
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So in terms of coloration, like I already mentioned, these guys are kind of a grayish bluish color. They have a lighter underbelly. Um, what's interesting is that depending on where they are, they have slightly different colorations. So the Asian animals are what are called two tones. So the back and sides are this kind of gray or bluish gray. The belly is lighter. The animals that are found closer down toward Australia, they say have what they call a tripartite pattern. So basically a dark brown cape, lighter sides, and a whitish belly. So it's interesting to me that they actually have slightly different coloration depending upon where they are located.
I wonder if it's because the habitats are that much different with clarity of water and that kind of
That
thing.
would be my guess. Yeah, as it's probably something to do with the environment itself potentially. And then just again, as if these animals are living in that area exclusively, just selecting for those animals that actually blend into that particular location better.
Right.
So that's really interesting. And this light ventral coloration, so again, they have the light color on the underside, extends up kind of up and around the underside of the flippers as well. So it kind of almost creates like a little sleeve coming up and around the elbow, the quote unquote elbow of the flipper there. In terms of size, they are anywhere between 6 to 9 feet in length, and they can weigh 200 to 400 pounds. Now, this is because the males are quite a lot bigger, bigger and longer. And again, there is some variation in size and weight depending on where they are. So again, you could imagine that some of these animals potentially living in a lake, maybe, for example, slightly more svelte than the animals that are coastal that are dealing with more, oceanic swell, currents, things like that, potentially. So again, that it's quite a wide range, but some of that is sexual dimorphism, and then some of that is because they do vary phenotypically depending on where they are as well.
They looking at their heads, I expected them to be smaller.
I
Like they were
know,
like
me
kind of
too. I
supposed
was a
to be
little
like,
surprised.
"Ooh, that's big."
Yeah, no, they're again like they're actually, I mean, belugas are slightly larger than that, but they to me they actually look more like a gray beluga than anything with a large
Yeah.
dorsal fin. So like I said, they do have a pretty solid dorsal fin on their back as well. The
Which I
dorsal fin
didn't
is
even see
also
because
oh
I keep looking at the faces. Like I just look picture faces, and I like ignore the dorsal fin.
a lot of the pictures are just like a cute face poking out of the water too, so it's easy to do.
Yeah.
Um, so again, the males also have a larger dorsal fin than the females, which is interesting. So it's almost more, getting along the lines of say like an orca, where the male's dorsal fin is very distinctive versus a female's. It's not to that extent,
Okay.
but I think it's interesting, like that there is visible sexual dimorphism with these guys.
Interesting. So you
Yeah.
probably, if you were trained with it, you could probably pick out that most likely that's a male or female. Maybe again, not as striking as the orcas, but
Right, which is actually not very easy to do with a lot of dolphin species.
no, not at all.
It's very, very, you really can't tell a lot of times unless you have physical evidence that one is a male or a female.
Right.
So yeah, pretty interesting. And then in terms of teeth, sometimes we have information about teeth, sometimes we don't. But what I thought was really fascinating with these guys is that the tooth counts are basically, again, the animals that are found in that southeastern Asian area have fewer teeth than in the Australian areas. So those that are found in and around kind of northern Australia, their tooth counts are significantly higher.
Well, because
So
everything's
I
going to
mean,
kill you in Australia. So, maybe it's just a thing.
sorry, Australian listeners. But we're literally talking like over double. So like tooth counts are anywhere from 8 to 22 teeth in the upper jaw and 11 to 19 in the lower jaw in each row.
Hmm,
So like pretty significantly different.
interesting.
I thought that was fascinating.
Mhm.
So,
Again, that
like I
habitat,
said,
it's possible that habitat difference is something, or what they're eating. Yeah.
well, what they're eating is what I would expect. So one would think that presumably the animals that are living in and around that kind of, more southern part of their range are probably foraging on different things,
Hmm.
potentially than the ones that are found in river systems or even
Yeah.
lakes. Um, or have to be more capable of capturing a wider range of species potentially rather than
Right. Certainly.
anything else. But I'll be interested to hear with the diet and behavior kind of what more about what they eat because I try not to research any of that so that I'm as surprised as all of you guys when I'm listening to this. So
I do the same thing for cat stuff, but every once in a while something comes up. It's like mixed in the middle. I'm like, I found out about that beforehand. But like, it's fun to like be like, wait, what?
but yeah, so that's basically what these guys look like and where they are. Again, they're kind of that Southeastern Asian region. Um, Pretty unique in the fact that they are coastal and river and freshwater systems. Like it's
Usually it's one or the
really
other.
interesting. Yeah, really interesting that they're all the same species. Like that's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Which, yeah, I
Yeah.
wonder if they're, don't mind if it's like ecotype like with orcas and bottlenose dolphins and things like that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, and I know I believe that there was another species down in Australia that I think for quite a while they were being confused with, and then it ended up like, no, that is actually a different species. And so it again, like it's very interesting to see how these things evolve as we learn more and as we get more eyes on the water and as we get additional tools like genetics and things like that too.
Right. And how sometimes genetics can make things clearer and also more muddier.
That is true.
Okay, well, so there's some really kind of some fun stuff with these guys. For foraging, their foraging behavior, they eat actually quite a few different things. It's mainly fish with crustaceans as secondary. So I think
Okay.
maybe the ones that are down that have more teeth maybe eat more crustaceans. I don't know, like chicken
Mhm.
crutches. I don't know. All theoretical guessing here. And then also cephalopods, so your octopi, squid, things like that, and fish eggs.
Oh, hmm.
And that's all I could find on it. Just that they eat fish eggs. I'm like, but how? But what? But who? But where?
Interesting. I bet that's in more of the river systems.
Like, yeah. If there's like Andromeda's fish or things that are coming up and laying eggs or other regular fish that are laying eggs. But it just
Mm,
seems like such a small thing. Like, why would like close to 9 foot dolphin eat? It doesn't
that's
seem like
very
there's a lot of
interesting.
yeah. So
Hmm.
that was in all of them. Like, yep, fish eggs, fish eggs, fish eggs.
Hmm.
Um, so there was a primary importance of cyprinid or cyprinid fish in northeast Cambodia and Laos, and carp is primarily in other areas. And I think that's more like Indonesia. A lot of the information here, I think, comes from more Indonesia area. There's a lot of more research there, I guess. They spend a lot of time feeding, apparently, and one place said that they may use suction, which would make sense if you're talking about similar to the way they look at belugas. Belugas also use suction, and they also do have teeth. Because a lot of times you see suction with animals that just don't have a lot of teeth anymore.
Hmm.
But that was also a lot of this is like take it with a salt because it's like we think they do, but based on
Right.
small
There's maybe like
occurrences.
some evidence, but we don't know if we can extrapolate that to like the entire population kind of thing.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
One thing that they do, and it's a unique behavior to the species, is they're the llamas of the ocean or river. They
Do they
spit.
spit?
They spit.
Ooh.
They spit a stream of water up to 1.5 meters. Yeah.
For
And
what purpose?
well, so they think it's either to expel water if they get too much water when they eat a fish or something, that could expel the water from there. But also to possibly, the main thing is they think it's to hurt fish. They're like, I
Oh,
know,
that's so
isn't
cool.
that neat? And there's a picture. I found a picture of
Oh,
you
interesting.
can look it up online, but there's a picture of it. He's just a huge spout of water.
Huh.
Yep.
That is right, because I guess then if you're spitting that kind of out and over the top of some
You can
fish, maybe
stretch
it would almost
back
be like a
through.
net, right? Where it
Yeah.
almost like simulate like a net coming over the top so the fish would like corral together. Oh,
hmm
wow.
That's neat.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's really neat.
So, and first one said just expel, and I was like, well, expel where? What do you mean they expel it? Where did they expel it from? And then finally someone was like, they spit it. I'm like, oh, okay, that's makes more sense. They also, fishermen have also seen them stunning large fish and then playing with them before eating them.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah. And there's quite a bit of this information comes from fishermen because there is a close relationship with these guys, which I'll get into a little bit more here with their behavior. So they have a lot of information because they're out in the water with these animals. And then they've seen like groups like cooperative hunting, 7 dolphins herd and circle prey, and then like they basically trap them, and those entrapments occur slightly below the surface level of the water, so they're like hurting it just below the surface. So that's basically what I have about their feeding. I don't think we have a whole lot of in-depth analysis on percentages and exactly what they eat, but mainly fish with a subset of crustaceans and apparently some fish eggs for good measure. And maybe a cephalopod or two. So their behavior, as this kind of goes with their feeding, they can dive up to 12 minutes, but most of them are around 30 seconds, 30 seconds to a minute, or maybe 2 minutes.
Interesting.
So I think average on one paper was like 20 seconds, but they can dive longer, which makes sense.
Okay.
Generally slow swimmers. That's been repeated. So apparently they are not speed demons, except for when they want to be. They did rate one up to 25 kilometers per hour when they were chased by a boat.
I
So
mean, that's pretty fast though.
I know, yeah, for real.
Wow.
I think that was one that said that one was documented that, but then I saw another website that had not just one. So I think they have documented it in a couple different times that they can be fast. I like manatees. Manatees can go pretty fast. Maybe not that fast, but they can go pretty fast when they actually want to, when they're being about to be hit by a boat.
Right. And again, like if they don't need to, or if they're in this brackish water where a lot of times visibility is an issue, why would you want to go fast when you're likely going to just hit something?
Yeah, like in river systems, like I said, there's a bunch of stuff everywhere. Speed is not your thing. That's why you're made for maneuverability.
Yeah.
So,
Interesting.
they usually are in groups of less than 6, but 10 to 15 up to 30 have been reported, so not totally uncommon. Like porpoises, they don't really like boats and they will dive when they're alarmed, or many porpoise species. So they're a little bit more shy than compared to some of our other dolphins. One website said the spitting might also be for sexual part of the
Kind of
mating
display. Yeah.
behavior. Yeah, so maybe whoever spits farther is the one you want to mate with. So that I'm not sure how true that is, but so this was really weird. One of the websites I went to said they were not thought to communicate through vocal signals. And I was like, that seems really weird because they're in a river and it's going to be hard to see. Like, how are they not? But then I saw it was a link to a dissertation, and they do use echolocation, so that's normal with other dolphin species. And I think a lot of times river dolphins rely on it even more than others. Like some river dolphins are completely blind because there's no point in seeing because you can't see anything. It's so murky. But there was another that linked to a dissertation in 2004 that said they use a wide range of vocalizations to communicate. So I'm like,
Interesting.
which one is it?
That's curious.
But I'm thinking maybe that other one was kind of like porpoises, like, oh, they don't communicate because they don't have whistles. They're not social whistles. They kind of just made a big jump,
like a sweeping statement.
Haven't like actually listened to them. So I think there's probably more vocalizations than not. The other thing that I wanted to talk about with behavior is I wanted to give you, there was some little snippets of how they interact with humans. So this cooperative hunting is not just between themselves, it's between them and fishermen. So in Myanmar, the Irrawaddy dolphins help fishermen cast their nets. The fishermen let the dolphins know they are ready to fish by tapping the sides of their boats. One or two dolphins then swim in smaller and smaller semicircles, herding the fish towards the fishermen. They then signal to the fishermen that when to throw the net as the fish approach the boat. The dolphins often dive deeply just after the net is thrown and create turbulence under the surface around the outside of the net. The dolphins eat the fish whose movements are confused by the sinking net and those that are momentarily trapped around the edges of the lead line or stuck in the mud at the bottom just after the net is pulled up. So this is cooperative fishing. It takes years of skill and trust between the humans and the dolphins to do that. So, I mean, I think that's passed on generation after generation in the dolphin species as population as well as the humans, right? You have to know what are the cues, what are the other things. So then there's a couple different ones too. Fishers in India recall that they would call out to the dolphins by tapping a wood key, also known as a lahai kwai, against the side of their boats. In Burma, the upper reaches of the Irrawaddy River, dolphins drive fish towards fishers using cast nets in response to acoustic signals from them again. The fishermen attempt to gain the attention of the dolphins through various efforts such as a cone-shaped wooden stick to drum the side of their canoes, striking their paddles to the surface, jingling their nets, or making calls that sound turkey-like. Call a dolphin with a turkey signal.
That's fun.
I am, right? Gobble, gobble, gobble. And then a pod of dolphins that agrees to work alongside the fishermen will entrap a school of fish in a semicircle, guiding them towards the boat. And in return, the dolphins are rewarded by the bycatch. Historically, Irrawaddy river fishers claimed particular dolphins were associated with individual fishing villages and chased fish into their nets. So these are individual dolphins that have chosen to do this specifically. An 1879 report indicated legal claims were frequently brought into native ports by fishers to recover a share of the fish from the nets of the rival fisher that the plaintiff's dolphin was claimed to have helped fill. So it's like, you stole my dolphin to...
Oh my gosh.
Isn't that crazy?
Interesting.
Like, that's my dolphin, that's my fish, you took my fish.
Funny.
So then with that, there's also a cultural aspect to these dolphins. The Laotians and the Cambodians have a common belief that the Irrawaddy dolphins are reincarnations of their ancestors. So very similar in some ways with the orcas here, where many of the tribal nations feel like they are like ancestors and also family members, current family members of in their tribes. Some even claim that the dolphins have saved drowning villagers and protected people from attacks by crocodiles, which is cool. Their beliefs and experiences have led people of the Laos and Cambodia to live peacefully alongside one another for ages. The West Kalminitan people have a similar story where the dolphins were naughty children that ate a pot of rice reserved for the shaman, but their mouths scalded and jumped into the water to cool themselves, but later transformed into dolphins.
Oh, interesting.
Don't steal you guys. Don't jump into the water and turn into a dolphin. Buddhist, Khmer, and Vietnamese fishermen have regarded these guys as a sacred animal. If caught in fishing nets, they release the dolphin from the rest of the catch. In contrast, Muslim Khmer fishermen kill them for food. This has led to the dolphin becoming reputed to recognize the local languages of the area and if approaching areas of the Khmer Muslim community with caution. So that's crazy because they're listening to the language and know which is safe and which is not.
And that makes sense too, in terms of we know that other dolphin and whale species other marine mammals in general can tell the difference between, for example, mammal-eating killer whales and non-mammal-eating killer whales and whether or not they should run away. Yep. So it makes a lot of sense. If something is threatening your life, you learn real quick to avoid things that sound like that because that's going to lead to somebody. Yeah, that's really cool.
Super cool. So then there was some interest-specific competition within the dolphins when Irrawaddy dolphins were forced inshore and they ended up being excluded by more specialized dolphins. When captive humpback dolphins and Irrawaddy dolphins were held together, reportedly the Irrawaddy dolphins were frequently chased and confined to a small portion of the tank by the dominant humpbacks. In Chilaka Lake, local fishers say when Irrawaddy dolphins and bottlenose dolphins meet in the outer channel, the former get frightened and are forced to return toward the lake. So again, and then we see that with the orcas, right? The residents, the big killer whales actually will go away from resident pods before they even meet up. Like they just So I thought that was quite interesting. The interspecies interactions are always fascinating.
Yeah, for sure.
Their reproduction, so that's the end of the really cool social aspects of these guys. Reproduction, basically, we don't know a lot. I found two things that say one says sexually mature around 4 to 6, the other one's 7 to 9, so close, but they live about 30 years is what they think. The mating season is real confusing. So the mating season is thought to be in April through June in one part of Indonesia based on the birth of calves in captivity in Jakarta. And that the calves are born in July through December. Others say mate and give birth throughout the year. Others say the Northern Hemisphere mating time is December to June. I don't know.
Which, and honestly, again, it comes back to like not being able to study them all the time. And then also they're spread over a weird, not a weird, but like they're spread over an interesting part of the world where like you're dealing with very different environmental conditions depending on where you're talking about in their range.
Yeah.
So interesting.
Their gestation is about 14 months. They did all agree on that. With nursing, one calf nursed for 2 years. I think that was a captive one. But 8 fish at 6 months, which is fairly normal for dolphins. Others say that it's a 2 to 3 year interbirth interval, which is similar. And they said in Mahakam might be longer. I don't know why. But sounds about like 2 to 3 years. Babies start eating around 6-ish months, which again is pretty similar to a lot of dolphin species. And that's what I have about reproduction, because we really don't. And I do think they mate just like belly. It's pretty quick. I guess they have seen that, and again mainly probably in captivity, but yeah. So that's it for reproduction. And I just think these guys are so cool with their interactions with the local people. It's just
yeah, it's really interesting.
So with that, we will leave you for a quick break, and we'll be back for the threats and status and a little bit of new research. So we'll see you in a few minutes. All right, we're back. So I guess you can probably assume you know what some of the threats are since they're so intertwined with people, but Kat's going to tell you about it.
Yeah. So first of all, let's talk about the status. So these guys are listed as endangered by the IUCN, endangered and declining, unfortunately. So their populations are under considerable threat at this point. The species as a whole is considered endangered in every habitat throughout its range. However, the freshwater populations are thought to be at greatest risk. So these are like the riverine and the lake-based animals. So one source I found said that there are actually fewer than 250 freshwater Irrawaddy dolphins left in the 3 river basins where they're found. So that's a really, really small population size. So let's get into why. So Cindy already mentioned one of these, and that is unintentional and intentional killing from fishermen. So gillnet entanglement is a major, major threat to all Irrawaddy dolphins. Obviously, these guys live in extremely close proximity to people and to a lot of peoples who rely on fishing as their primary source of income, the way to subsist and provide food for their families. So they have a huge amount of interaction with fishing. So whether intentional or not, entanglement is a very common problem. As you say, depending on where they are, those fishermen will either, help the animal, assist it to get free if it's still alive, or will just go ahead and kill it and use it for food alongside the fish. So it depends on where they are in their range, as to how that's kind of handled. A couple sources I found also were talking about some electrofishing in some of these rivers, which can cause a pretty big risk to these guys as well. For one river in the Mahakam River, for example, the gillnet specifically were thought to be responsible for 66% of the deaths that had a known cause. So again, there's always a percentage of deaths that we just don't know what happened. But for those of them that actually had a definitive cause of death, 66% was due to gillnet entanglement and eventual drowning. So it's a huge problem. And again, that really just comes from where they are in the world. These are communities and people that really rely heavily on fishing. And again, when you're talking about a river system, it's hard to get away from a net. You don't have the spaciousness of the ocean, for example, in all of these places to be able to get free. So, um, the other problem that we have that's related to people, well, actually, they're all related to people. Let's just be real, except for one. Okay, so next up on the list, I was going to try to condense there, and I'm like, no, that's not true. Captivity, which again, Cindy already alluded to, they have proved popular for the captivity industry, mostly because they are easy to catch, and all you need is a canoe and a large net. Again, when you're trapping something in a river and there's only so far away it can get from you, it's a lot easier to catch them. And again, they seem to be in general kind of just less, they're not particularly aggressive. They don't seem to kind of fight as much as potentially other dolphins would. So there are large numbers of them that have been captured for aquaria, including exporting to other parts of the world. Have been so that's mostly in Thailand, Myanmar, Cambodia, Vietnam, and Indonesia, which are all heavily touristed areas. So again, a lot of these places have large aquaria for tourists to come visit and also export to other places like Japan. So there was an international ban on commercial trade in 2004 that was put into place that prevents further exportation of dolphins and other marine mammals. However, of course, the ones that are already in captivity are still there, presumably still there, and they can still capture for local aquaria. It's just they just can't internationally export them.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Better,
Yeah.
but not the best.
Correct. So next up, coming back to human activity kind of around the rivers themselves and these coastal areas, contamination is actually a really big problem for these guys. So specific ones that were mentioned were gold mining, which is apparently a common activity in several parts of the Irrawaddy's range. And that's mostly in these riverine systems, which again, we already know that these are the animals that are more threatened, that can cause significant contamination. I believe they did call out specifically the Irrawaddy. I can't say that. That river, particularly gold mining, I guess, is a very common activity. Mercury poisoning from gold mining and hydraulic blasting and dredging is also a big problem. So that's very, very prominent in Myanmar, which again is an extremely popular tourist destination. So there's a lot of development happening in that area because of a very booming tourist industry as well. So that also, again, for many reasons, contamination, habitat degradation, which we'll get into next as well, and also just that acoustic impact. Disrupting their fish and their prey, really in every aspect that's going to cause a major threat to these animals. And also if you get caught in a blast, just like literal physical harm too from
Right.
getting, if you're near a blast site.
Yeah.
Like I said, habitat degradation is also a big issue because of where they are. So obviously this is in part due to the destruction of the environment itself. But this can also create fragmentation in the populations due to damming of several rivers. So for example, in Laos, they've introduced several dams upstream to the rivers. And so the Mekong River has reduced water flow now. And so the dolphins have been restricted to specific pools within the river. So again, it's really challenging when you're talking about these systems that can be very quickly changed by human impact. Additional to that, there are quite a few land use changes that are occurring, like I already said, throughout this area. So again, the tourism thing is a big deal, but they also are very, very prominent in palm oil exportation. And so palm oil plantations have massively increased sediment loads, which again restrict that river flow, potentially segmenting off parts of the river. And this also brings in pollution issues, reduction in fish spawning areas, and of course, just the disturbance levels. So these guys are really getting hit from all directions.
It feels very similar to the river dolphins in China, like the Yangtze
Yeah.
went extinct for very similar reasons. And I just wanted to point out palm oil. That one is one that you may want to pay more attention to when you're looking at, like I do when I'm looking at ingredients. It's not a sustainable thing, and there's more than just dolphins that are being just hurt by those plantations and stuff. So if you can avoid palm oil and ingredients, that's something you can do at home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And so the last one that I have is just a very short note on predation. So their main predators are thought to be sharks, potentially crocodiles in some parts of their range. But I don't know that that's really been documented. I think it's more of an assumption based on their size and their overlapping range with several shark species and of course crocodiles as well. But really, the big threats for these guys are human disturbance. And it's very interesting to me that, you know, in certain parts of their range, they are considered sacred, and yet
The
in other parts,
juxtaposition
they
is
are,
so crazy. It's like
yeah.
you are, but you're not. Like,
Yeah. So I mean it's good in a sense where obviously, you know, it's not having to work with every single area to cut back on some of these threats and problems, but of course in the areas where this is a problem, it's extremely challenging. And again, a lot of these areas are economically a little more poor as well. So if there's a chance to make some money and support your family, it's a really challenging situation.
right.
Yeah.
So do we have a status of like how many there are? Do we not know?
Um, I mean, well, like I said, we know that there are fewer than 250 freshwaters left in the three river basins.
Yeah,
I think beyond that, it's a little bit unclear because again, their range is not very well known. So it's kind
yeah,
of like, oh, we have a specific count from this one location, but in
right.
terms of an overall population estimate, I don't think we actually know.
Interesting. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, makes sense, but it's unfortunate for sure.
yeah.
Um, well, so some of the new research that I have, I'm gonna jump to the ones that are related to anthropogenic issues and their populations. They I'm going to start off with this one. The Actually, no, I'm going to start with this one. There's long-term population and distribution dynamics in Indonesia and the effects of coastal development. This is by Krebs et al. In 2020. They did boat surveys over 15 years, and they saw a shift in the distribution between 2000 and 2002 and 2008 to 2015, with significantly lower occurrence in the lower bay versus the upper bay, and the lower bay is what has gotten more busy coastal development. No sightings in the outer bays in later years. That coincides with increased shipping traffic as more have come in. There's also peak strandings in 2016 and 2018 that followed an extremely high phenol levels in the bay in 2015, and then a big spill in 2018. It must have been like a shipping thing.
Interesting.
So going to contaminants and whatnot. So the annual mortality rates in that area are 0.67 per year, which may be like 0.67 dolphins, like that's less than a dolphin a year. But it's unsustainable based on, you know, if there's only 100 animals, well, losing one year is unsustainable. Like,
Hmm.
so it's important to remember that when you see a number, like put it in the context of what the population is. If there's 10,000 animals, one year is not that bad. But this
And
is not the
actually,
case for these animals.
yeah, something to add to that too, in terms of the contamination threat that I mentioned. Something they have noticed is that infant mortality is really high in these animals because of that contaminant offloading. So in several populations, they have animals that are mostly 20 years and older in that population. So they have basically aging populations without recruitment happening. So
Right.
again, if you have animals that are leaving the population, being taken out of the population and not being replaced by new babies surviving, that's going to be a problem
It's a problem.
as well.
That's
Yeah.
what's happening to the workers too, right?
Yeah.
Have babies that they don't survive. It's a problem.
Hmm.
So kind of on that same line, there's a paper on demographic collapse and low genetic diversity in the Mekong River. This is Crutzen et al. 2018. So there was a significant concern for the long-term survival of the remaining population as a result of low abundance, slow reproduction rate, high neonatal mortality, I just mentioned, and continuing anthropogenic threats. So they looked at the demographic history based on 60 Irrawaddy dolphin samples that were collected between 2001 and 2009. They found a monophyly of the haplotype. So basically, it's just one compared to other populations, suggesting that the long-standing isolation of the Mekong dolphin population from other populations. So it's what you're saying before, where they're getting stuck in these pools, and
Hmm.
then you don't have any other genetics coming in. You got a little bottleneck there, and so now you're
Yeah.
just super low genetic diversity because you're mixing with the only ones that are there. At least 85% of all individuals in the two were in two main study areas, and they bore the same mitochondrial haplotype. So
Hmm.
there's just one. There's basically one kind of version. Basically, haplotypes are like these different genetic sequences that you can look at to see how diverse the population is. If there's multiple haplotypes, it means there's a lot of genetic mixing going on. If there's only one or two, then it means it's probably been isolated. So these guys definitely have been isolated. They looked at microsatellites which is a slightly different part of the genetics they're looking at. Only 10 were polymorphic, and polymorphic means that there's more than one version of it, right? And so that's not good that there were only a few that were polymorphic. Most of them were not. And they exhibited very low levels of genetic diversity. And so both the individual and frequency-based approaches suggest that there are very low and non-significant genetic differentiation of the Mekong dolphin population. Evidence for recent bottlenecks were equivocal. Like the bottleneck, there's low genetic diversity. It's only what's left in there. And the current size of the population is only 5.2% of the ancestral population.
Wow.
Yeah. So they've got but that basically kind of covers everything that you had just said in the threats. Like there's all these things going against them, and it makes it just even harder for them to survive with all this new coastal development and everything else happening on there as
well. Yeah. Yikes.
There is one paper, I don't have too much information from this one, but it was the most recent. It was surviving in a crowded world in the largest brackish water lagoon. This is by Akaria et al. 2023. Unfortunately, I didn't have a lot of time to read. I'll read through it. And it's basically just talking about this group, not giving any kind of new results or anything, but it's a subpopulation of Irrawaddy dolphins found in the Chilika Lagoon, a brackish water ecosystem in the eastern seaboard of India, which is also the single largest habitat of Irrawaddy in the world. They are survived by only a few hundred individuals in small pockets in the Chilaka Lagoon. The damming and diversion of rivers opening in Chilaka, unsustainable dolphin watching tourism, pollution, net entanglement are some of the prominent threats. Predicted climate change scenarios such as potential warming of the lagoon, increased littoral drift, sea level rise, and increased frequency of cyclones would exacerbate the survival crisis. It is also emphasized that the conservation strategy of the Irrawaddy must be moved from species-centric to ecosystem-based for their long-term sustenance. Right, so the idea that I think they're using these isolated individuals in this to show how heightened the issues are for these animals, and because that they're not super unique, maybe that one particular one kind of is, but there's also these other lagoons that you're talking about, or other small areas that they get stuck in, and like the Mekong, where they're completely genetically not diverse anymore because they've been stuck and cut off from other things. It exacerbates, those being isolated exacerbates every other threat that is already going towards them, because they don't have that genetic diversity to be able to respond to.
Yeah.
So the ending to this one is not going to be super long. The other new research that I found was mainly they're like, we need to understand what the habitat characteristics are for these animals to be able to protect them. So one is identifying habitat characteristics in crucial areas, Peter et al. 2016. This is in Malaysia. Boat-based surveys from 2008 to 2012. This is only during the dry season, so there must be bias with that. But they found they are more likely to be present in waters within 6-kilometer radius of the river mouth. So again, that river estuary water, very important. And there was they found relationships between salinity and tide were also big predictors about when you would find them. So knowing when and where and why, what they're correlated with is really important to be able to do conservation, right? So maybe, they're only during this deeper water at this certain time of year, then you can shift other things, other human-centric things around those times and reduce impact if people want to do that. The last one I have is habitat modeling in Thailand. This is Jackson Ricketts et al. 2020. Boat-based and visual surveys, and then they used a model to took that data and then use a model to predict where they would find these animals. And they found that they were most strongly predicted presence, depth most strongly predicted presence, and temperature was a strong predictor of group size. So they were predicted to have most presence around 10 meters, between 7 to 13 meter depth. Predicted greatest number was around 24.93 degrees Celsius and 25.3 degrees Celsius. So that's when they really like to get together and have a party. And then they were predicted to be at 2 primary locations, one in the larger one in the center of the area, and a smaller area in the south of the study area looked at. So the idea there is like both of those studies, it's like, okay, well, now you know what you need to protect, or where you need to protect, or when you need to protect. And so I think that's what a lot of the new research for these animals are going to be, is just literally, because everything else is kind of moot at the point if you can't save them. So right now it's real, they're in danger. There's a lot of things pressuring them. The genetic diversity is low in all these populations. There's more anthropogenic threats. You really have to find out when and where and why they are to be able to protect them. And then you can start looking at their behaviors, reproduction, and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a triage process.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So these guys are really cute. So let's end that on a fun note.
Oh, I have some fun facts that we can end with.
Okay.
Just so we're not ending on like a really sad note.
It was just so sad. I forgot about the fun facts.
I know. Well, there's only a couple, and they're the name related. So the usual my usual nerdy little name piece at the end. So the common name Irrawaddy dolphin actually comes from the first specimens that were described in the Irrawaddy River in Myanmar. So again, I apologize for butchering that name, but in that specific river in Myanmar, and that was where they were first discovered. So it kind of evolved out of that name.
I wondered if that was the connection, because it seemed very close.
And then their Latin name, which is Orcala brevirostris. Again, I don't speak Latin. Means short-beaked. So kind of cool. So again, kind of comes back to that little snub face that they have and the more bulbous head. So, nice little fun tidbit to end on there.
And just remember that they work with humans. Like how smart are they to be able to figure out with the fishermen a way of like, okay, I know this means that, I know that means that, we're gonna get fish, and then we're gonna get fish, and like the fact that individuals like knew specific individual boats and things like that. I mean, that's just
very intelligent,
and just cetaceans are so cool. They're amazing. So I love hearing things like that and showing how intelligent they are when we just don't think about it. Sometimes
I think a lot of times the intelligence is in ways that we just can't relate to. So I think in things like this, it's a little bit easier to relate to and understand.
Yeah. And you might be like, oh, well, like that's not that big a deal. But like, think about you're a dolphin and that's a human, like very, very different. And so they're bridging this huge species gap to be able to communicate with one another and like understanding the differences between the two languages, at least enough to know one is bad and one is good. Just very, very cool. Anyway. So that's the Irrawaddy dolphin. Next time we will see you for a journal review or a topic if you want to email us that. We're going to be getting towards the close to the end of the year. I think we may only have about 2 episodes left because we'll do one before Thanksgiving and then we'll do one kind of the beginning of December, and then we usually take the end of December off for Christmas break and whatnot. And we might have some new news coming in December about the future of the podcast and what that's going to look like. So just a little teaser for that. But if you have anything else, please email us and let us know what you want us to talk about. Don't forget, our merch store is open and we have a lot of new options. We even have shorts now. We have shorts, some bags, some mugs, and all sorts of different shirts. And particularly that the 10-year anniversary merch is limited edition. So I'll probably have it up throughout the end of the year. So if you want a 10-year anniversary special shirt or other item, please go get that now. And the money that we raise from there always goes directly back into our research and educational outreach initiatives and things. So
and we will drop the donation link in the show notes as well, our end of year fundraiser, and that is rolled into our 10-year fundraising effort. That is open until the end of the year as well. So if you are interested in giving a donation to help support our work, please do. It would be extremely helpful. Like Cindy said, everything that we raise, no matter how small, goes straight back into our programs. So we'll drop that link in the show notes for you as well.
Yeah, we're a small nonprofit, so every little bit helps us keep going, and we appreciate it. So with that, we'll let you go. Have a great, we're recording this on Halloween. So
Happy Halloween.
I guess it'll come out tomorrow. So like, hope you had a great Halloween, but we're going to
Send us your pictures. Send us your pictures of your cool marine mammal themed costumes. We want to see them.
So I don't know if my shirt's going to come by tonight, but I got a shirt that's a gray shirt and it says pretend I'm a porpoise.
Nice.
And I was like, I have to buy that. I do. Okay. So I'm going to be going trick-or-treating with my daughter, who's going to be Elsa, and my son, who's a character from Naruto. So I have to figure out something if my shirt doesn't come. But it'll be fun regardless. So anyway, we will talk to you next time. Bye.
Bye.
This was brought to you by Pacific Mammal Research, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. To learn more about the species we discuss, check out our blog. Head to our website, www.pacmam.org, that's PACMAM.org, to check it out. Also, help us continue providing fun and educational content like this by donating today. Your help is how we can continue to do our work and share it with you. Thanks.